All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Jamie Smithson and I'm with Belmont Village of Westlake Hills. This talk today is being done in partnership with our Lakeway community. If you have any questions about either of our communities, we offer all levels of senior living from independent to assisted to some very specialized memory care programs. Please feel free to reach out and I will put you in contact with the right person. For today, I am muted. Have I been muted the whole time?
Yes.
Oh man,
well,
that was
not
great.
the whole time, just recently.
Okay. We'll be using the chat feature for today's presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just pop it over in the chat box and we will make sure that we get to it at the end of Dr. Johnston's presentation. And today, as I said, our speaker is Dr. Chris Johnston, who received his Ph.D. In sociology from Iowa State University. He has extensive teaching and research background and has procured over $3 million in grants and private funding for his research. Dr. Johnston retired as the Director of Gerontology and Professor of Gerontology and Sociology at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. There he developed an award-winning online master's program in gerontology and directed an Institute of Gerontology. He taught in the Dementia Studies graduate program at the University of Stirling in Scotland and worked for the Dementia Services Center there. Dr. Johnston has twice received an award for Researcher of the Year, as well as other honors for his exemplary teaching and research skills. Dr. Johnston came to Texas State University to initiate and be a major contributor to their new online master's program in Dementia and Aging Studies. He also donates a great deal of time to local nonprofit groups such as the Alzheimer's Texas and the Alzheimer's Association. And I've had the privilege of hearing him speak numerous times, and he is definitely one of my favorite local experts. So without further ado, Dr. Johnston, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I keep getting at the top of the screen, admit requests. So do I click on those or are you going to do that?
Yeah, Landry and I will manage all of that. You just,
okay,
yeah, do your thing.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about my model. I will say our model because my wife was co-editor, second editor on it. Of our model that we call Alzheimer's disease as a trip back in time, or the time travel model. The model was developed back in the year 2000 in the American Journal of Alzheimer's. At that time, the British asked us to do a one-page version of the model for caregivers so they understand the process of time travel and they can actually join their loved ones in their time travel without imposing their time frame on them. And then we updated the model back in 2017 with an article in Behavioral Science, which dealt with advanced dementia, but used a different wording, shall I say. We don't use the word regression anymore. We're using the words time travel for all the different facets in which a person revisits earlier stages of their life, and we ask the families to join them in those stages, all the caregivers to join them in those stages, rather than imposing their time frames on the person with dementia. So in saying that, what I will do now is just have a little backdrop to the talk. And let's see if that's changed it. Okay. One of the things that we have moved from the idea of dementia as tragedy to dementia as disability. And that's been a big shift in thinking. One person, a social worker way back when, used to call Alzheimer's an ongoing funeral. And there was this whole idea of, of it being a tragedy. I say, tragedy, of course it is a tragedy in some degree. We can look at it that way if we want to. My mother had vascular dementia. My oldest brother has Lewy body dementia. I've joined them in their time travel, and I've also gone through grief. And grief is real. It's what we go through when there's a change in the perspective that the person goes through with dementia. But our belief now is that this is the best way to look at it, is a disability with abilities. The best way to look at it is trying to identify what they can do over what they can't do. And part of it also is understanding their life history. And their life history feeds into what we call person-centered care or personhood. To improve the care partnering that we do with them, we have to raise social awareness of what dementia is and how we can be equipped to help empower the person who is going through whatever disease it is that's causing this condition we call dementia. And Dementia Citizenship is something that was promoted in the UK and now in America with our program at Texas State, the first in America in Dementia Studies, and ranked #1 in dementia education in America, by the way. It was a recent ranking of gerontology programs. Already in 5 to 6 years, our program is ranked #1 in the nation in dementia education and #22 in the nation in gerontology education. So we're very proud of what our faculty have done. And part of our approach is what we call dementia citizenship. This is not new to us. It's something that was promoted in the UK, where in England and Scotland, where we were, they're light years ahead of us in dementia care. And so we have a lot to learn from them, and they have some things to learn from us as well. But citizenship is human right. It has to do with human rights that people with cognitive disabilities have. And so Dementia Studies is basically looking at social models of care. We're moving away from medicalizing dementia care with drugs, right? And with constraints and other types of things, and learning how to empower them with social engagement, social networking, being able to find out about that person and be able to see what their likes are throughout their lifetime and be able to connect with them in meaningful ways. And that's what Dementia Studies is all about. In fact, last night I was out walking my dog, and I was talking to this fellow on a porch, and just so happens he works in neurology at UT. And I mentioned, he asked me what I did, and I said, well, I'm in Dementia Studies at Texas State. He said, oh man, I've heard about that program. He said, I'm sending some of my students to it. That's UT. So, we're a leader. And what we're saying here is cutting edge information. And I'm hoping that it will have an impact on you in terms of a shift in your way of thinking. And dementia, as we see it, is a shift in the way a person experiences the world. A person with dementia experiences the world differently than you do. So in terms of imposing your reality on the person with dementia, does that work? No, it doesn't. Trying to reality orientate a person who is confused, who has problems with thinking, remembering, and reasoning powers, disempowers that person. So what we do is, if they have, we try to help them help themselves through agreeing with them and finding ways to distract them or use other methods that do not conflict with that person. So we don't deny this is awful disease we call Alzheimer's, which is only one of 80 diseases that cause dementia. But we also know that there are ways that we can create happiness and empowerment with people who are trying to operate with this disease. So here is a basic diagram of, a brain, and it shows, of course, the frontal lobe where Alzheimer's is. I'm mainly going to talk about Alzheimer's, but I'll talk about the other diseases as well, because I mean, they're some of the major diseases that we see are like Lewy body disease, which is like lesions that they get in their brain, and Lewy bodies, of course, is where you have the Parkinsonian tremors with their hands, and they experience hallucinations. And this is kind of how we identify people. Hallucination is a distortion in perception. And so they see or hear things that aren't there. And they have that sort of tremor in their hands. And they also have what we call in psychiatry delusions. A delusion is a distortion in thinking. So they believe you stole their purse, or they think that someone has broken into their home. And oftentimes care partners will try to correct those their thinking and say, well, you're okay, there's nobody that's broke into the home. That usually doesn't work. What works better is to say, I will check it out. I'll go find out what's going on and make sure you're safe. Or I'll go find your purse. Validating them, as Naomi Feil wrote a wonderful book on validation therapy. And so it's validating what they're saying. It's not disagreeing or trying to correct what they're saying. Those types of struggles that care partners that usually don't go through training, and that there are family members that don't, they're going to try to correct the person and bring them up to the present time when they're in a different time frame, and correct their delusions and hallucinations, rather than try to validate what they're saying and say, I will help you, and offer them assurance. And then they don't think they're going crazy. They instead think that things are going to be better or safer or whatever. So this model is on the screen, you see, as what we call a nonlinear model of Alzheimer's disease. Many of you from the National Alzheimer's Association, which I was on their board for a year, until I figured out that all of their grants went toward medical instead of social things. And so I got a little discouraged, and after a year I decided, well, I'm going to devote my time to social models of care. Texas leads the nation in the misuse of psychotropic drugs in nursing homes. A drug is not the answer for problem or challenging behavior. I put problem, it's usually a problem for the caregiver, right? For the care partner. We don't call it problems, we call it challenging behaviors. And there are answers to challenging behaviors. We may not have the answers all the time, but we're going to work as a team in order to try to find the answers and to try to find what might work. And if it doesn't work, we go to plan B or plan C. But in the time travel model, as you can see, you have the loops, larger loops in the early going, and we're hypothetically starting at age 80. They could get Alzheimer's, for example, as early as age 28. And in fact, I show a film to my class of a patient. I don't call them patients. Well, they're patients when they're in hospitals. Once they get out of a hospital in a nursing home, they're not, or assisted living, they're not a patient. They're a resident, or they're a person, even better. And so, when the person experiences the disease at whatever age, it can be with Alzheimer's, I'll say, the earliest age we know is 28. And I show a film of a young woman who's 32, who's pregnant and has Alzheimer's. And her husband's interviewed in our film, and he talks to us and he says, I now have two people to give with. And of course, the reason for, the film of a younger person with this disease is you get the old timers stereotype of Alzheimer's, that all people with Alzheimer's are old people, or elders as we call it. Elder is a much better term than old person. Elder is what Native Americans would call older people or senior citizens. Elder has a lot of respect around it. So I like that term. But it happens as early as age 28. And so when we talk about the whole spectrum of brain diseases, whether it be frontal temporal disease, Lewy bodies, vascular dementia, which is these short strokes, vascular dementia works very similar to this Alzheimer's model as well. But let's talk about the Alzheimer's model here of time travel, so that I'm going to try to make it as understandable as I can. It really isn't difficult to understand, I don't think, but it doesn't mean we're dumb if we don't understand it. I'm just going to try to make it as simple as I can, and then leave it open for questions. We're saying that hypothetically, the person gets it at age 80, and at age 80, what happens is the person begins a process of time travel. And during that process, they time travel in terms of cognition. And what we mean by this is their ability to reason. As they time travel, say, back to 10 or 5 in their life, their reasoning powers are different than what their powers are at 60 or at 70 or 80. So emotionally, they time travel as well. And what actually happens with emotions is they actually get better in getting in touch with their emotions. Because as they travel back to 80 to 50 to 20 to 10 to 5 to early childhood, the healthiest people emotionally are children. Their emotions are just the same as their behavior. Like an infant, for example, is not going to hide their emotions. Their emotions and their behavior are totally in sync. So if they're, wet, or if they have, some type of problem, they're not going to hesitate to cry or to let you know what the problem is. As people time travel emotionally back to earlier stages of their life, they get more in touch with their emotions. And we know, as Piaget's stages of adult development in reverse, what this process is, we know that as people become older, they become teens and young adults, they learn how to hide their emotions, right? Because you hear, stop crying, grow up, be a big boy, this type of message from parents. So the thwarting of emotions is a social process. With the lack of social fronts, and the genuineness of the person becomes very, very clear. They're genuine in terms of their emotions. And it makes families, when they're sad, it makes families uncomfortable because they don't want to deal with certain emotions that are real. And what I do is I validate their emotions. It looks like you're sad, or it looks like you're happy, and I give them a hug, or I validate them. So socially, they revisit all the people they knew. As they're time traveling back to 70, for example, they don't know anyone from 70 on up to 80, but they know everybody from 70 on back. And when they time travel to 40, the only people they know and can recognize, and the only social events they recognize, are the people and events from age 40 backward. They don't know anything from age 40 forward unless they go through this spiral back and forth. They spiral back up to 50 for a brief time, but it's a downward spiral, right? So they'll go back up to 50 maybe or 60 and recognize you, but then they go back to whatever age they were back at 30 or 20 and don't recognize you. So it's this downward spiral back and forth. And when they socially time travel back to age 5, they're only going to recognize their parents. And they might recognize pictures of their brothers or sisters, but they certainly don't recognize you as a brother or sister, at your age now. Or if you're a spouse, they don't recognize you, and they don't recognize grandchildren. So it's when I showed my mother, who had vascular dementia, she had time traveled roughly. This is inexact; it's not totally exact, but she had time traveled back to her probably between 20 and there are deficits. If you use Riesberg's 7 stages of development, which are in our article, they have certain deficits with each stage. So you can use this linear model to identify where they are, but also realize that they're going back and forth through time. Does that make sense? You identify the markers for each stage, but you realize that they're not permanently in that they fluctuate back and forth through time. And that's how our article works very well when you put it together with Riesberg's 7 stages and substages, because Riesberg's article of 7 stages and substages actually shows the markers that they are. When they become incontinent, they're in stage 6, right? And so when you can use the stage model with our nonlinear model to totally understand how Alzheimer's works. And so physically, they go back to the earliest years of their life. Again, it's the stages of development in reverse. So remember how we crawled, we walked? It goes back to walking, crawling, and then fetal position, death. The same order physically that we went forward with. Isn't that, does that make sense? If you look at, how Alzheimer's disease actually works, you understand it. If you've dedicated your career to working with people with Alzheimer's, you realize that the psychomotor retardation sets in, the tightening and stiffening of joints. They get to the point they can't walk. What's happening is they're going through this stage of adult development in reverse. And so they go back to a wheelchair or sitting. They can't walk because they're too stiff to do that. They have a lot, falling. And falling is always a big problem that we want to avoid. Someone who lived to 102, someone asked him, "What's the secret behind you aging so well?" And he said, "Only 2 words that you need to pay attention to that will create a situation to where you can live as long as I did. Don't fall." Falling can be the end of your existence. It can really create problems. And so physically, they go back and they revisit those earlier. They have superhuman strength at first. They have a lot of strength. And then they go back to where they become weaker and stiffer as more frail, as they're revisiting these earlier ages of their life. And what I'm trying to help care partners do, and all of us that are dedicated to our lives to people with Alzheimer's and related disorders. I don't call them disorders, I call them related cognitive diseases that happen, whether it be brain trauma or whatever the disease is. So as they're going through this, they go through this physical change in which they get this tightening and stiffening of joints, and they get to the point they can't walk. And so their functions change, right? What they can function to do. Their functional abilities are different as these time travel back to 70 and 60 versus when they are 10, 5, and closer to death. Functionally at that point, they have aphasia, total aphasia. They can't talk, but they mumble. But you know what the amazing thing is? There still are therapies. You read our 2017 article on advanced dementia. We point out how to tap on the 5 senses for people that can't talk, that are in that those final advanced stages from 5 backward. You see how tight those little circles are? There's less shifting, but all the circles are connected in this downward spiral. So when they're at the, even they're at their age 5 and they have aphasia, in their time travel, the loops are connected. So there may be a brief lucid moment where neurons kick in their mind and shoots them right back up to the present, to where they recognize their spouse and say, "Hey, George, you got a haircut," or something like that. And then go right back into that total catatonic state that they're in at stage, not stage, but at age 5 and lower. So what we want to do is make their life as happy as possible as they go through this disability until they move on to the life hereafter. And as they do all of this, what we do is we try to tap on their 5 senses. We have found that people that have total aphasia, when we give them music, when they're back at age 5, what are the songs that they heard if they're age 80 now? What are the songs they heard back in their day and when they were age 5? He's got the whole world in his hands, right? He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world. Their eyes light up. They start talking and singing briefly because it touches music throughout the lifetime, it's stored in the brain. It moves us in certain ways. I remember certain love songs when I was dating my wife. Those love songs, I still remember those. And, as I go back to childhood, I remember the songs that my parents played. Claire de Lune, my mom was a classical pianist. I remember that song. Somebody puts earphones on me and I have advanced dementia and I listen to that. My eyes will light up and I'll start humming. So we know, and there's some beautiful tapes on YouTube using Naomi Files validation therapy where they actually do look at these old songs and time travel. And what they do is their eyes light up. They become animated when they before had this sort of stare straight ahead, no sense of life in their face, totally bored out of their mind, because so many long-term care situations in Texas and America, you can find that people have 2 problems. They're lonely and they're bored. And what happens to any of us is we're lonely and bored. We get depressed, right? So how do we engage them? We engage them through audio, listening. We engage them through smell. Okay, poof, they live in New Braunfels and they're German Americans. And you cook some sauerkraut on a small stove and you bring the sauerkraut in and let them smell it. And they've time traveled back to age 5 and they smell the sauerkraut. You may not like it, but if they're German, they pretty much do like it. I can tell you, because I'm from Iowa and I grew up with German food. I'm not German, but I grew up with the food. All right, so smell. And then, of course, we have sense of touch. Well, we have found that people that are in nursing homes or assisted living, and they're bedridden, and they're screaming out, "Help me, help me, help me," that when we give them a large heated doll that has a heating element in it, and they hold it, or a big toy, it doesn't childrenize them at that point. They've time traveled. It would childrenize them and infantilize them if they had only time traveled back to age 60 or 50 or 40. But when they're back at age 10 or 5, it's an appropriate activity. We give them that large, whether it be a bear. Bears are used a lot. A teddy bear with a heating element, or just a teddy bear. They stop screaming. They need touch. Another sense to tap on, right? So tapping on their sight, their hearing, their touch, their emotions, affectations. There's so much we can do with them that matters. And some people, particularly loved ones, matter through a certain portion of this, in the sense of seeing and acknowledging the people. But as they time travel back to age 70 to 50 to 40 to 30, imagine you're married and your husband has dementia, and you have a son, you have a daughter that looks very similar to you. And say you're 80 and she's 40, and he's traveled back to 40. Do you think he would imagine she's you? Yes, absolutely, that can happen. Or you may have a son that looks like a brother of the person with dementia. So as they're time traveling, the people they knew from, say, hypothetically, they're at age 40, the people they knew from 40 backward, if there's anyone that resembles those people, they're going to try to connect. And of course, they'll be labeled as, "Oh, you made a mistake, I'm not him." And they'll try to correct their thinking instead of joining them with validation in their trip back in time. Does that make sense? I hope so. So are there any questions at this point before I go further?
Don't see any in the chat box. Guys, feel free to chime in with the chat box questions at any time.
Okay, they'll have to turn on their microphones, or to be able to talk.
Yes, no, and there's someone chatted. Let's see. No, they said no questions. This is very good, very informative. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so where we left off then is we're talking about the time travel. So I want you to understand how certain behaviors occur. Have you ever seen, have any of you, you raise your hand on the chat board, have any of you, you ever remember them talking to a mirror in the bathroom? Anybody?
We have at least one yes.
Someone said yes?
Yes, multiple people.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to the time travel model in order to understand the behavior. So when they time travel back from 80 to 20, for example, and in their head, they're age 20, and their husband is 80. And so they look in the mirror and they see an 80-year-old face, right? They're 80. But they've time traveled in their head with Alzheimer's back to age 20. So they see, and they're looking for a 20-year-old face in the mirror, and see an 80-year-old face. So that'd be like Jamie looking in the mirror and seeing an 85-year-old version of Jamie. And Jamie would say, "Who are you? What are you doing in my bathroom?" And that's what they do every single day when they look in a mirror, when they've time traveled back that far. You know, they're in a different time frame in their head. And then what makes it problematic for them as well is, as their spouse, you want them to always remember you. Who wouldn't? That's normal human nature. But when they've traveled back to age 20, they don't recognize you. So to reality orientate them and say, "I'm your husband," is like asking a person with no legs to walk. They're in a different time frame. So you are whoever they think you are. And that is what's difficult, because we have to, it was hard for me to eliminate my ego and realize what's best for my mother with vascular dementia. And vascular dementia worked very similar to this time travel. It's time travel, but it's these little infarcts, these short strokes that occur from 80 to 70, like stair steps. And you can tell the days they have these infarcts or these short strokes. They're still going back in time with vascular dementia, but it's with these little stair steps. And my mother, who had these little stair steps, reached a point she didn't recognize me. You know, some family members will not visit the person anymore because of the fact they say, "What's the use if they don't recognize me?" But there is a use. They have a disability. We don't abandon a child who has Down syndrome because of their disabilities. We want to empower them with their disability. So the fact that my mother didn't recognize me, and my oldest brother, who I visited, you know, up in Omaha with Lewy body disease, didn't recognize me. It could hurt my ego, but what I decided to do is I decided, okay, I understand what's going on here. What can I do to help my mother be happy in the time frame she's in? She doesn't have to know me to be happy. I know her on a spiritual level, soul to soul. I don't have to have my name called out from my mother to be validated. I validate it by the smile on her face. So I develop a book. My wife did this, I will say. My wife has her Ph.D. in Dementia Studies and is very good at this kind of thing. And so Roxanne put together pictures I gave her from my mom's earliest years. My mom was raised on a farm and had 2 sisters. And so we got pictures of the sisters, pictures of mother in early childhood, pictures of her parents, my grandparents, pictures of the farmhouse. There weren't any pictures of the house I grew up with. There were no pictures of the 5 boys she raised. She was in a different time frame. She wasn't talking much, but when we got this picture book together, "Mom," she said, "farm." Now, she knew I was somebody that loved her and was a caring person, but she didn't know I was her son when I sat with her and went over that book 10 times. Every time was a new time. And she would look at these different pictures and she would reminisce. Reminiscence is very powerful for people with dementia and in general, and people with Alzheimer's. And particularly if you can join them by these early pictures, and you have to blow them up big enough to where they can see them without their appliances, without their glasses. And then the early smells. My mom has always been attracted, and I am too, to the smell of lavender. When I was in Scotland, fresh lavender over there just had an amazing smell. And remember Yardley's soap? It's still sold, you can get it. But my mom would always have Yardley soap. So guess what? I got an essential oil with a smell of yardley. Or you could get fresh lavender to be even better. Put it up to her nose. Oh, her eyes light up. She remembers lavender growing up, you know, and it relates to those earliest years. And so my mom was always like birds. We put together a book of pictures of things she likes. Flowers. I know what kind of flowers she likes. I grew up with her, you know, and I know what kind of birds she likes. So we're able to put together that kind of picture book as well. And this is something that you can go through. You know, it's amazing to me. I went to see my oldest brother, Nick, who has Lewy body disease. And this was a nursing home up in Omaha. And they had him inside, and, you know, he wasn't very happy. And I said, have you ever taken him outside? He was a farmer. Duh. I mean, you know, it's pretty Alzheimer's 101, you know, Dementia 101. I took him outside. They had a beautiful garden out there. And I took him outside and showed him around, and his eyes lit up. He started going, oh, you know, he was pointing to flowers and stuff. I've never seen his wife. My sister-in-law said she'd never seen him so happy. And he was like a father to me, you know, quite a bit older, and, you know, always was kind to me growing up. And so I call her almost every week, you know, to check up on him. But, you know, just a little thing of taking him outdoors that related to the work that he did in his trip back in time is so important. And as we go through activities from age 80 all the way back to 5, we join them with appropriate activities that don't include just hobbies and things they like, but work activities they enjoyed to do. So when they're still ambulating, they're still walking, and they're busy, and they're in the earlier stages, you know, if you use Riesberg stages, typically at stage 5 is when they typically go into long-term care. If you use Riesberg stages. And so when they've time traveled and they first come into assisted living, memory care, they're very capable of sweeping if they like to sweep, or raking if they like to rake, or folding laundry if that's something they did all their life, or church bulletins. Work is worship. Work is important to a lot of people. The kind of work that they did, the kind of chores that they did, having a mailbox where they get mail. Just getting mail is exciting for some people. You know, walking out, you have a mailbox there. They aren't going to look at it and see whose address is on it, but they get the mail out of the mailbox, give it, you know, they look at it, set it down, you put it back in, they get it out again, and they get excited again. You know, understanding what these little things become big things to them. It's these little details that for gerontologists matter. And that's why we want to encourage families to engage the person and, you know, in the kind of work they like. Now, some people, most people love animals, right? My mom didn't. I would never do pet therapy with my mother. She wanted off the farm. Now, she loved the farm because she grew up with it, but she wanted to be a city girl. She never wanted dogs, but she had dogs because Dad wanted them and 5 boys, you know, so we had dogs. And she got to the point where she could tolerate them, and she would pet them occasionally, and, you know, but left the general care up to my dad. So to bring pet therapy to her in a memory care would be a bad deal, right? Because she has no history. If you want person-centered care, you got to match up with what she loves to do. And having a parrot in her room, or a dog or a cat, assuming that all older people, all elders love animals, that's not the case. But you would take her out to a above ground garden when she was walking, and she would want to get her hands in that dirt. And she might pull the flower out, but she's going to do some gardening. And so understanding the family becomes part of the care partnering team, to where they give this essential information to us so that we can provide more and more exciting, engaging social activities for that person with dementia, rather than simply letting them vegetate in front of a television. And TVs generally are bad ideas for people with dementia. Why is that? Why do you think that might be? If they have problems with thinking, reasoning, and they have a short attention span, why would a television show be something they would typically love to watch once they time travel backward? Now I'm going to say they all don't. Some will actually act like they're watching, and they'll do it for a period of time. But are they really paying attention to it? Are they really getting anything out of it? The thing we want to do is we want to engage them with their hands and activities. So, I went by a nursing home some time back before the pandemic, and looked at their activity schedule, and I saw a popcorn party, pizza party. All that is eating. That's not an activity. We all eat. Putting popcorn in front of them or even having them watch that is not an activity. Now, it's another thing if they're actually making what they're going to eat. In a therapeutic kitchen, for example, my wife was involved in a home as a consultant in Oklahoma, which had a therapeutic kitchen, and they actually were stirring muffins, blueberry muffins, that they could eat. So they became part of the process by doing. When they can do music with their hands, it's very enjoyable for a lot of people. So families working together with professional care partners and the person living with dementia is very, very important, so that we can time travel with them back through time and join them in their experience with Alzheimer's or whatever disease they have. So I hope this, we'll get back to this in a second, but I hope it helps. Now, an issue of Provider Magazine showed was a Dutch study that highlighted the following cover teaser: Alzheimer's findings surprises researchers. So of course I rushed to the article to find out what happened, and that was so shocking. Turns out the people with Alzheimer's still can learn. They can learn new things. By testing the memorization of wayfinding routes, the researchers found that markers along the route were learned and recognized by the subjects, even though many of the people living with Alzheimer's have difficulty with visual spatial skills. So cueing properly, having a memory care box by their room. The box has very important content issues. First of all, with Alzheimer's, once they reach stage 6 using Reesburg's stage, they don't look up. They only look down at a 75-degree angle downward. So the box has to be low enough that they can see what's in the memory box by their room, right? And then the content of the box. Suppose we go back up to the trip back in time, and we put a current picture. Here's the cursor here. We put a picture of the grandkids, or a current picture of the couple when they're in their 70s or 80s in the memory box. Is that going to cue them to their room when they've time traveled back to age 30? Are pictures of grandchildren put up in their room going to help them when they've time traveled back to age 30 or 20? Food for thought. You know, it'd be like if I put a picture of a stranger in your room. and you wondered, what in the world are you putting that in my room for? You see how the time travel model changes your thinking, changes your perspective. We don't mean to create problems or challenges for them, but we do because we're ignorant and we don't understand how the disease actually works. Once we understand how it works, then we can go back to other family members and educate them. And isn't it exciting that we play a part in the happiness of a person with a disability? That we can actually join them in their time travel, and we can teach and train our grandchildren and other family members not to correct their mess ups, as we put it, with their names and so forth, but to join them in their time travel and explain the time travel to our loved ones, so that when they visit, it's a constructive visit, and they can actually empower the person with Alzheimer's. I want to leave it open for some questions. I'm sure some of you have some, and I'll try my best to give an explanation if I have one. If not, I'll look it up and email you.
Dr. Johnston, while we wait to see if we have a chat, I can comment on, since the pandemic happened, a lot of what we've been doing has been FaceTimes with people. It has been interesting. So when I hand the FaceTime, I cover the camera until the other person picks up, because when you put it in front of them and it's a mirror right there, a lot of times they're like, who is that? Like, yeah. It really freaks them out. Yep. And then when the other person picks up, it's about 50-50 with people that want to correct and say, no, I'm so-and-so, I'm the eldest granddaughter. And then the other ones that just kind of go with it. Of course, depending where they are in the disease process and what kind of a day they're having. So that's been really interesting to watch that repeatedly, because now we've been doing FaceTimes for months now with family members. So that's something that I've been able to witness and experience firsthand. And it is hard to watch people correct and be like, no, don't do that. Just go with whatever reality that kind of they're presenting in that moment. Because when, they hang up with them, if you've spent the whole time correcting them, they're very frustrated and confused by the end of that call, which in my opinion would defeat the whole purpose of seeing the loved one.
Yeah, and I think the education is the best way to do it if a family member wants to be educated. Sure. And some don't. Some clearly don't. It was that case in my family. Here I am, the gerontologist who specializes in dementia. And my youngest brother, who's a lawyer, actually was the main care partner with my mother. And he would call me, and, he would have he'd be taking mom out for a walk. And I've used this story before, but, he would have little anecdotal stories he would call me about and tell me. And sometimes he'd put me on the phone. When she was earlier on in the disease, she still recognized my voice. But then as things it was up in Iowa, and I was, not in Iowa at the time. And so again, it was only I could talk on the phone, but, and we didn't have FaceTime at that point. So that couldn't be used. It wouldn't have helped anyway with mother when she had time traveled back that far. So, little anecdotes that were, there is humor in life, and we have to see humor in life. We don't laugh at them, we laugh with them. And, mom was out looking at the river one day with my brother, and a deer ran in front of the car. And my brother said, well, Mom, there was a deer, pointed at it, and look at it, it's standing there. And she says, yes, I like that, but I don't think I'm quite ready to ride that yet. So we get objects mixed up with dementia as well, where we start combing our hair with a spoon, or we think a deer is a horse. And so objects get confused, right? But it is kind of humorous And again, we're not laughing at her, but it was a funny thing that people say. And I say funny things too, that you'd think I'd have dementia sometimes, some of the things I say. So it's
Dr. Johnston, we actually have a pretty interesting question over here from someone. They say, my mother-in-law doesn't recognize her husband who lives with her and gets upset thinking he's a stranger in her house. Using logic, of course, doesn't calm her down. She doesn't want him to sleep in the bed, but they only have a single bedroom and no sofa. How best to handle this?
Well, obviously there's no easy answer to that, right? If there's no other bed. And one of the things, you could say I'm a caregiver. That might help. I wouldn't use care partner because they don't understand that word, but I'm a caregiver and then, if it really upsets her and upsets the sleep and stuff, they might need to get a bed in another room.
Yeah, I can say that I've experienced this with talking with people on the phone numerous times, and they'll go back and forth. It depends on the day, and they'll remember the husband and then they won't. So it can be a roller coaster. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes the sedative will work, but you can't use a sedative every night. And so you may have to switch off and I'm not saying Ambien or whatever the doctor has to prescribe it, but, so the person gets to sleep first and then you enter the bed, or wait till they get to sleep and then enter the bed. But they're still, when they wake up, they're going to see you, and it could be very upsetting to them. So you try to avoid those things the best you can, and sometimes you can't avoid it. But you try to think outside the box and think, given the resources I have, is there some way I can make a makeshift bed that's reasonably comfortable in another room? And can I identify myself as a caregiver? And if they're looking for their husband, yes, he'll be home soon. I'm watching you at the moment. I've been here as a caregiver, I'm just briefly here, but he'll be home soon. And you try to validate their concern rather than correct their concern. And certainly sometimes, we always look for social solutions first. And if the social solutions don't work first, then we resort to a psychiatric solution, a medical solution, right? A medication or something that would sedate them to a certain level to where they're not so anxious. But certainly that's a last resort, and it's something you discuss with a doctor or a geriatric. I prefer a geriatric psychiatrist.
So we have another question, if you pop up here, that I want to make sure we get to. So the next question is, so as dementia sets in, and I think it's the degeneration is going on, of which everyone is trying to find a cure for, in your studies and experience, is there anything such as nutrition or physical activities that prolong the progression of dementia?
Well, there's been some recent studies that look at the keto diet as maybe having some benefits. I'll be interested to see how those come out, how those work out. There's other suggestions. The autoimmune protocol diet might help. Is there absolute proof? No. But inflammation is really kills brain cells, right? And you look at the average American diet, and it creates a lot of inflammation, and inflammation kills neurons. And so the closer you can come to a diet similar that is not going to cause inflammation, the more benefit you would have. But it doesn't cure it, in spite of some of the claims that are out there. And believe me, I get them every day. But I'm basically a nerd, so I'll be nice, and when people claim that they had a magical cure, And we're getting this, by the way, from medical schools all the time that are saying, we're on the verge of finding a cure for Alzheimer's. You know what, I've been in this for 35 years, and I've heard this from medical schools all this time. And do we have a cure for Alzheimer's? No. And that's why the UK, 40% of their money go to social models of care research to make their life better, rather than 99% going to a medical cause or cure research, as is in America, which pays little attention to caregiver research. And that's what our program's is really based on, is caregiver research. And how do we do homes for aging in place? How do we do homes for dementia, where they can sit up in their bed and see the toilet and get to the toilet? Universal design for aging in place. My wife and I are actually building a home like that in Austin for ourselves, a home for aging in place. And I think this is going to be a going trade. And of course, adult day services for dementia. And we're involved in a project in Georgetown for that. You know, so there's really, you know, no clear-cut answer about diet, but certainly any diet that reduces inflammation is a good thing.
Okay, well, I think we have gotten to all of our questions pretty much. So I just want to thank everyone for being on here today. You know, again, Dr. Johnston is up there, see behind him, at Texas State University, and very proud of that program that he's built there. And we are very lucky to have him as a resource for us. He will be coming back to do another talk for us in September. So Dr. Johnston, we look forward to working with you again soon. And everyone else on the call, please be on the lookout for the next talk that will be again in 2 weeks. And this also, we recorded this. So if anyone on here thinks that they know someone that might benefit from the information that was shared here today, just feel free to email me and I can get you a recording of this. But with that, we will end our session. Again, thank you, Dr. Johnston, for your time, and everyone else. You'll have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, and I would also recommend maybe they could ask you certain topics that might be of interest to them, give you some input.
Yeah, if there was one facet that Dr. Johnston touched on that you would like to hear more about, I'm sure he'd be happy to go into detail. I am personally interested in your research or what other countries are doing, because I, you know, from here, went to school here, I don't really know what other countries do. So, you know, I think that that's what the talk in September I would be most interested in. We have a quick message here at the bottom. They're just thanking you for your time. So yeah, guys, feel free to email me with anything that you want to hear more about. And we'll see everyone soon.
Thank you.
Bye.